Welcome to the field. My name is JJ. Well, round two, week three. They're trying to trick us, but I'm keeping up with the score. Round two is in the books. It was probably a little bit less box office than what we'd seen the week previous, or especially what we saw in the opening round of the season. But there were certainly some standout performances across the weekend of AFL footy. Sydney's skills, they are sublime. How many descriptive words starting with S can you think of to describe the Sydney Swans? They are absolutely sensational. Sizzling, sublime. I love the way they move the footy. It's been my focus on the Channel 7 socials this week, so make sure you check those out, 7AFL on Instagram and Twitter. Just the way the Swans, now they are blessed in a sense to have so many guys who can kick the footy to an elite level or even a very good level. They've got, 5 or 6 guys who I would describe as elite kicks at AFL level, and they've got another 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 guys who are very, very good kicks as well. In fact, when you go through their 23 from the weekend, there really isn't a guy on their list who you're not that comfortable with when they've got their footy or the footy in their hands. Even guys down back like Melican and Rampy can use the ball comfortably enough. So they are up and about. Make sure you check out the 7 socials for a little bit of vision from down the field, and you can see how Sydney are so potent. It's very simple. It's not reinventing the wheel. Some of the language I tried to explain and describe there as well for those who are interested in that sort of thing and trying to work out why, excuse me, the Suns are up and about. Their game against the Bombers was quite spicy. We've since learned about the Essendon edge, I guess the physical nature of the game that Essendon will want to bring to the table. We know the Roos had some of that when Brad Scott was the coach. You think about Scott Thompson and a few others. Now Scott's trying to implement that with the Bombers, and we know that the Bombers haven't not been great defensively. Their scores from stoppage, loss, defending the ground, that sort of thing hasn't been great for them. So if they can add a level of physicality to their game, we'll see if that helps them along. Geelong went on the road and were basically without a midfield, except for Patrick Dangerfield and Max Holmes. Mitch Duncan was a late withdrawal, as was Tom Atkins. Mark Blitzarves had to go into the ruck for long portions of that game. We know Tanner Bruin and Cam Guthrie weren't there. They went on the road and beat the Crows. I expected the Crows to play a lot better, and I'll speak about them in a moment. And, of course, Travis Boak, Port Adelaide's GOAT, as they say, chalked up game 350, if you don't mind. So there was plenty happening across the weekend. I need to give some big-time kudos to Tommy Stewart as well. He, in his 150th, he chalked up one of the great individual games. I heard a lot of criticism come the way of Matthew Nix for the way they handled Stewart or didn't handle Stewart. I mean, they put Luke Pedlar on him. They basically gave Pedlar the job and the role to stop Stewart, and his instructions would have been to play on his back shoulder, play on his body. Stewart will take you to the ball. Stewart plays in defence as if he's a forward. He'll just go to where the ball is about to be. And that's why he does take so many intercept marks. Now, he takes 10 in the end, and he takes a few that are uncontested, and he takes a few in space. And you're thinking to yourself, well, what are Adelaide doing? But plan A was to be physical and use a young player like Pedlar, who's great in a contest, who's pretty good overhead. He simply beat him, hands down. Stewart just straight up beat him. And they had to make that move because at quarter time, Pedlar was getting absolutely belted in 1v1s. Stewart was taking over the game. So from there, do you have another option? People have said Keys. He's not big enough. He's not going to bother Tom Stewart. And Keys' game relies upon running up and down the ground. Even when he's played as a defensive forward, I know he did it on Nick Dacos, but his ability in that sense is also still being able to get up and down the ground and gut run and have an impact in the game. He would not have been the right matchup for Tom Stewart. So there's no one else to really do the job. It's either Pedlar or bust, and it was big time bust at quarter time. So I can understand why they dropped it. Now, what you try to do when Stewart frees himself up, and I've played this role a lot throughout my life, is you're trying to have 2 forwards surrounding 3 defenders. So it's you and another big forward. So Tex Walker and Darcy Fogarty, most likely. They're direct opponents, and they'll try and surround Tom Stewart. So you say, well, let's try and at least make this a half contest. But the thing is, Stewart reads the ball so quickly. He runs to where the footy is so quickly that often you can do nothing about it. And sometimes great players do things that you're just powerless to stop. And that was an occasion. We've seen it from Dustin Martin at the other end of the ground. We've seen it from the best ruckman, Max Gawn, has done something similar at different stages. When the best players are taking over and when the best players are in the zone, you're basically powerless to do much about it. So I give Adelaide a bit of a break there because Stewart was incredible. It may be the best individual performance we see this season. Let's get into a few of the topics I want to cover before we get out of here, because it's a big Easter weekend of footy coming up. Thursday night, the action, and I'll tell you what, Collingwood and Brisbane, if you don't mind. I want to talk about umpiring. Now, I almost never talk about umpiring. I almost never refer to umpires and umpiring. But I'm wondering about what's being told/taught to our umpires at the moment. Our boundary umpires, and we know they've been in the news, but also our goal umpires and our central umpires. It's been a little bit weird. The unwillingness and the uncertainty around making decisions is there. It's obvious. It's been happening a lot. So the first aspect I want to talk about is centre bounces. Now, I was working at the Richmond-Port Adelaide game last weekend, and some of the bounces that should have been recalled in the centre that just weren't were really strange. Now, I know it's a bit of a blight on the game and it's an umpire highlighting, his or her own mistake. But the reality is the way the rule is written at the moment, when those balls are either bouncing out of the circle or they're unable to be contested by both ruckmen, then they've got to come back. Now, too many on the weekend and too many in the early part of the season have been allowed go on or play on when the ball cannot be contested by both or does land outside the circle. Now, as far as I'm concerned, to solve that issue, now hear me out, I would change the rule at centre bounces. I would say for the first 20 minutes, as that clock counts from 0 up to 20 minutes, I would say wherever that centre bounce goes, it's play on. If it goes 10 metres one way, play on. If it goes 5 metres your way, play on. Whatever happens, play on, like it used to be. Because it swings and roundabouts. You'll get some to advantage. You'll have some that disadvantage you. But once it hits 20 minutes, to avoid that late in quarter, late in game bad bounce that favours one team over the other, call those ones back. So for 20 minutes, let it go. It's play on. It's random. Our game is random. That's the beautiful thing about it. But from 20 minutes and beyond, bad bounces get recalled like they do at the moment. That's the way I would go with it. But at the moment, too many bounces are not acceptable and they're not being called back. The other thing that's been happening from a central umpiring point of view, we're seeing tacklers not rewarded. We're seeing the player being tackled who either has or has not had prior opportunity given too long in a tackle. Now, the example I want to use is from the Sunday game between the Dogs and Gold Coast. It was debutant Jed Walter who tackled Bailey Dale. Now, fortunately, Walter was falling over, so he was actually unable to really complete this tackle, but it's holding the ball every day of the week. Dale has had plenty of time to pick up the footy, turn, take a couple of steps, and dispose of the ball. He's unable or hasn't been willing to do so. It's got to be holding the ball, because if Walter is in a stronger position, if Walter's still on his feet, think about that. Then if that tackle's allowed to continue, what else is he supposed to do except for throw Dale to the ground and sling or throw or slam him to the ground to try and encourage the umpire to say, hey, I've got control of this guy. I'm tackling him. He's not disposing of the ball. You're not calling it holding the ball. Okay, so I'll throw him to the ground. The umpires have got to be a bit quicker to call either it's a bounce and he didn't have prior opportunity and I'm going to bounce it quickly, or it's holding the ball. Because the longer a tackler is allowed to tackle, the more likely he is to throw someone to the ground or try and pin an arm and take them to ground. And that's when we see some big issues. So that's something I think they could correct Absolutely. The other thing is the arc. We're referring everything to the arc at the moment. Now, I understand what happened to Adelaide late last year. They missed a final spot because of a decision that should have been sent upstairs that wasn't. But we're sending everything up there now. We're sending absolutely anything that's within a foot of a post is going up. Anything that even looks remotely close to being touched on the line is being sent upstairs, and it's just slowing the game. It's halting the momentum. So I understand there was a big blunder late last year, but dead set. We just got to move the game on. We've got to back the umpires in to make the decisions, and on we go. So I promise that's my yearly rant about umpiring. And it's not a criticism per se of what's happening. It's just a query around more of the communication or the instructions from top office, from HQ, filtering down to the umpires, because I feel for the umpires. They're not actually full-time employees. They all hold jobs, or most of them hold jobs Monday to Friday. I do feel for them, but certainly at the moment, there's just some weird things going on with centre bounces, with the arc being every second decision goes up to the arc, and certainly the way the game is being officiated from a tackling point of view. Now, Sydney, I wanted to talk about them, and again, I do highlight them on the 7 AFL socials, so make sure you check that out. But they are dead set electric. They look the real deal. I loved what Essendon did. I thought they took the game right up to them. It was the most enjoyable game I've sat through this year, and I've watched pretty much every game of a Thursday, of a Friday, and then of a Saturday night this year, and I loved the game. It was entertaining. It was high scoring. People say it doesn't need to be high scoring for it to be entertaining. Well, I'm pretty entertained by goals. I don't know about you. And we saw plenty of goals in that game. But what I love about Sydney is their willingness to move the footy and their synergy with their ball movement. And none of it, as I highlighted in the video on the 7 AFL socials, none of it is groundbreaking. None of it really requires phenomenal skill. Sydney are lucky they've got it through Goulden and Blakey. McInerney's a great kick. Braden Campbell's a beautiful long kick as well. You know, their big forwards can kick the ball. Heaney's a nice kick. Warner kicks it pretty well. You know, Papley's creative. They've got so many players who are really good kicks. Cal Mills, when he comes back, he's a good kick as well, makes great decisions. They've got Lloyd and Florent and those types down back. Cunningham, when he returns from his concussion, they all make good decisions, and they're all pretty good kicks. And when you can really find one or two quick kicks and marks on the SCG, you can start to attack deep into your forward 50. So I love what Sydney are doing at the moment. I think the 2022 version of Sydney is back in 2024, but even supercharged more so because Heaney is a powerful on-baller. They've got other guys who are playing back to that level of footy. You know, Papley is, Chad Warner is, after having probably a little bit quieter season last year. McLean's improved. We know McDonald's kicking goals, and Marty looks great. Hopefully his body can stay in one piece as well. Tom McCartan's an absolute lockdown defender. He'll be up there when it comes to All-Australian discussions late in the season. We've got Haywood, guys like that who I haven't even spoke about. In terms of bringing Parker, Mills and Adams back into this group, so let's say they remain healthy. It's likely they'll get a few injuries, but let's say they remain healthy. So Mills walks back in no matter what. The beauty of Mills, you can play him on ball, you can play him out in the wing, you can play him half back. So he can play anywhere. He'll fit in, no worries. Put his magnet up and just say, look, wherever we need him, wherever we've got a bit of a gap, we'll just plug him in. Parker's interesting. He's tough, he's dogged, and they probably imagined him playing on ball, inside mid, like he has done for the last 13, 14 years. I think he'll play forward. I think he'll play as a really dogged, tough, hard-working, cheeky overhead marking forward. I think he'll go down there and be okay, and he'll have bursts and spurts on the ball when they need him. As for Adams, I can only imagine part of the move from Collingwood to Sydney, and it was a shock move, was we want you to play on ball. We want you to come in and be tough and be a hard body and be physical around the ball because we've got, Warner and Goulden and Rowbottom and guys who are young and developing and aren't big. Now, Adams is not big either, but he's tough and he's got a hard body and he's got a hard edge. But you can't plug him into that midfield. I think he's got to go forward as well. So he's the real watch. I think Parker can play forward. Mills can play wing or back or mid. But Adams is certainly the watch. Now, it's likely they'll get injuries across the way and you need to have great depth, but Adams is certainly the one to watch as we move along. I love what Sydney are doing. A lot of people are in love with GWS. I'm in love with what the Swans have done. From good to bad, Adelaide, my old mob, what was that? What was that on Friday night? At home, coming off a really poor performance in round one on the Gold Coast, where you almost pinched it, but you played poor footy for 3 quarters. They get Tex Walker back. They go home. They get a big crowd, 45,000 people in the stands, probably 40 of them Crows fans, and Geelong just run away with that game. Geelong were in control of that game pretty much all night, without Duncan, without Atkins, without Bruin, without Guthrie. That's a disappointing loss when it comes to the Crows. I had the Crows in 4th this year. I thought they could make a massive leap. Now, look, you might say, well, that's your problem. You picked them to finish 4th. I didn't, and that's true. But the way they fell down on Friday night is a new problem for them. We know they've got problems in the back end. They're not big, and they're not blessed with key defenders, hence why they drafted one, and they tried to chase Harrison Petty. But we know their midfield's a little one-paced. We know that Laird and Dawson and Crouch are amazing accumulators of the footy. Berry's tough and honest. And they've tried to add Saligo to a wing to get some more burst, and they try and use Rankin and Rochelle in the middle where they can. But their issues were in the forward half. They were inefficient going inside forward 50, and their scores per inside 50 or their goals per inside 50 were absolutely woeful. They never kicked more than 3 goals in a quarter in that game against Geelong. Now, Geelong does have a great defence, and Tom Stewart was responsible for a lot of that, but no more than 3 goals in any of the 4 quarters. They only managed 9 marks inside 50 for the game from 66 entries. They had the ball inside forward 50 on 66 occasions. Let's say, loosely, the ball was kicked inside 50 58 times out of the 66 entries. There might have been a few handballs. There might have been a few times where players ran through 50 and then had shots for goal. So let's say there were 58 kicks inside 50, only 9 marks. For Adelaide, one of the highest scoring and most potent teams in the competition last year. I know Riley Thilthorpe's not there, and I know it was Tex Walker's first game, and he was, so they say, a little hobbled from that sore back. But seriously, the lack of polish and the lack of synergy in that forward 50, a group that does have Walker and Fogarty and Rankin and Rochelle, it's a group that's had a lot of money and capital, draft capital invested in it. They need it to perform more so than it did. So they're a big watch because they've got Good Friday footy over in Perth. And I was having a little read on the afl.com.au website, and I saw this stat. Adelaide under Matthew Nicks, and we know he's been there for 3 or 4 years now. Adelaide under Matthew Nicks has never gone on the road and beaten a top 8 team. Never. That's not good. Zip. Now, Freo are looking good. They're certainly looking better than I thought they would. They're 2-0. This is their chance. This is their chance. And forget about the top 8 teams. Nicks's Crows, since the start of 2020, are 9 from 39 on the road. 9 from 39 on the road. You can work out the percentage. I'll give you a hint. It's not good. It's dreadful. But they can win this game. Adelaide can go to Perth and upstage, upend Fremantle. It'll be late on Friday night. A lot of us will have gone to bed after a boring Good Friday. Sorry to those who love Good Friday, but it's quite boring. They can win that game of footy, and they need to because they're staring at zip and 3, and they've got some tough games thereafter. I think they've got Melbourne in gather round the week after that. So a few quick ones before I go. That's the meaty stuff, the chunky stuff, but a few quick ones before I go. I was having a bit of a look at the Dogs and the Suns on Sunday. It was Tim English up against Ned Moyle, who replaced Jared Witts. English was great. He was really impactful, but Ned Moyle, I'll tell you now, I saw him play some VFL footy for Gold Coast when I was working at the Cats. He's going to be chased big time this offseason. I know he probably is under contract. I'm not exactly certain of his contract status. He will be chased. He had 14 touches, 25 hitouts, 4 clearances, kicked a nice goal. He will be chased hard. Think about Sam Draper, who was chased by St Kilda and offered a big contract from St Kilda before he'd ever played an AFL game of footy. I think Moyle, who has played a few games, is exposed at the level. We've seen him go blow for blow with Tim English. He'll be chased hard by clubs who need a ruckman. He was fantastic on the weekend. Port were fantastic as well in the second half. And congrats to Travis Boak in his 350th. But Todd Marshall and Jeremy Finlayson were 2 guys who got rolling in the second half. And they both were coming in with the little man on the shoulder, the little goal-kicking demon who sits on the shoulder and says, where are you going to kick it? Left, right, out in the full. You're going to shank it, kick it too high, kick it too low, too close to the man on the mark. Well, Finlayson came into the game having kicked 0 goals for the week previous. And Marshall, who's got a lovely technique, Finlayson does as well, for that matter, Marshall had kicked 0-3. So 0 goals, 7 between them. They both missed their opening shot in that game. But in the second half, Marshall booted 4, took some nice marks. Finlayson booted 3. Dixon was fabulous. He was great in the contest. And they've got Ollie Lord, who's not far away, returning from injury, and Georgiades as well, who's coming off an ACL. So Port Adelaide legitimately have 5 tall, big forwards who are good enough to play AFL footy. It's a luxury for them. And I guess whichever guys are in form will play. I want to talk about the Peter Wright situation as well before I get out of here. Of course, that collision with Harry Cunningham, which left the Swan concussed and subbed from the game. Now, Wright will get suspended, but he's unlucky. He's unlucky. And I want to explain why. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve a suspension, but he found himself in a position where I think human instinct took over. So he's committed to the contest. He wants to fly for the ball. He goes up to jump off the ground and contest the ball, and then realizes I'm late. Now, he probably should have left his arms in the air, but if he does that, if he keeps his arms raised in the air, he leaves himself open down the front. Broken ribs. We saw what happened to Stephen May. Issues there, bruised ribs, whatever it may be. So I think his body has involuntarily taken over and he's braced for contact. And I sit in the camp where bracing and bumping are completely different. He's braced. His body has taken over. It's braced. Think about when you're going for a run, right? Around the block. You put your sneakers on, you go out for a run around the block. So you're running up to a corner and you're about to turn left. Someone is running down the street on the other side of the road. Oh, sorry, around the corner, I should say. And as you both go to turn the corner, you're about to collide. What do? Do you continue to run straight through them and just knock yourselves both out, a big head collision, you both hit each other down the front and you both fall over? Or does human instinct take over and you brace and you go side on because your shoulder and your arm can take some of that contact? You brace. Your body takes over. You're actually making an involuntary move there to protect yourself. And I think that's what's happened here with Peter Wright. Now, I understand he's broken a few rules. He's off the ground. He hasn't contested the ball per se, and he'll get suspended. But he's unlucky. He's really, really unlucky. This is the situation where I think his human instinct has taken over. I don't think he deserves 3 or 4 weeks. I think it's 1 or 2. He'll probably end up with 3 or 4. I think he deserves 1 or 2. He's certainly very unlucky. That might be a polarizing view. That might be a view that's contrary to everything we're trying to do when it comes to looking after the head. And I'm certainly all in on that. But certainly Peter Wright had to be a little bit unlucky in that moment. That's about all we've got time for on the field. As I've mentioned a few times, make sure you are checking the 7 AFL socials about Tuesday afternoon/night. You'll see, though, that video about the Sydney Swans ball movement drop. Thanks for those who are listening and or watching. Certainly those who are watching on the YouTube channel. Love that. Appreciate that. Thank you for that. Make sure you do subscribe and share it with a friend. And as the great Pat McAfee says, be a friend, tell a friend. I'm loving everything about the footy at the moment. Certainly enjoying sitting down on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays and watching the footy. And I tell you what, round 3 is going to be interesting because we kick things off with the winless, Brisbane Lions at home against the reigning premiers who are winless. Yes, winless. We've got the winless Lions, the winless Pies, a grand final rematch. Who'd have thought? That's the beauty and the randomness of the AFL season in 2024. My name's Josh Jenkins. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you at the end of next week's round of footy.